Introducing Axios New Orleans reporter Chelsea Brasted.
Hey everyone. Hello. Hello everyone, I'm Chelsea Brasted. I am really excited to be back here in Baton Rouge. I spent a few years here after graduating from LSU. See some familiar faces in the room, so it's always nice. So I am one of the co-authors of the Axios New Orleans newsletter. My fellow co-author, Carly Colath-Wells, is out in the audience. Please make sure you say hi, but she's friendly enough. She's probably said hi to all of you already. So we are really excited to be here in Baton Rouge. We are just down the road doing our Axios New Orleans newsletter and love an excuse to get back here. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our next speaker this morning. She is the Executive Director of Future Energy at Greater New Orleans, Inc., Lacy McManus.
Shall we?
Yes, let's sit.
Indeed, very comfy.
So Lacy, we know Louisiana is an oil and gas producing state. We've been doing that for a minute. But what are the opportunities in green energy that you're most excited about in your role?
Yeah, so it is just wild when we look at our pipeline across Louisiana and the announcements of projects. That's economic development parlance when we talk about the projects that we've seen that have said we want to put roots in Louisiana, we want to build out some kind of a physical presence in Louisiana, and perhaps most importantly for us in economic development world, we want to hire headcount in Louisiana, bring jobs to Louisiana and add to Louisiana's economy. So when we look at our announcements, those projects that have said that publicly, have final investment decision, that are moving into those construction phases of their projects and or bringing on workers and workforce in Louisiana, when we look back to 2018 to today, we have $50 billion in announced what we call future energy projects across the state of Louisiana. That's wild. That's jobs for Louisiana residents. That's income producing opportunities for our Louisiana parishes and our Louisiana communities. And as Camille was referencing earlier, when we look at this future energy landscape, it's very much of an all of the above approach to the energy sector. So when we look at those projects that have been announced, there's First Solar, which we talked about a bit earlier this morning, a big $1 billion plus investment in Iberia Parish, just outside of Lafayette, where my family's originally from, bringing on over 700 jobs to Iberia Parish, producing solar panels that will now hopefully be installed across the state through some of our exciting DOE and EPA grant opportunities. When we look down in our neck of the woods in Southeast Louisiana and the Greater New Orleans territory, we see exciting projects from some of our incumbent oil and gas energy players like Shell, for example, making an investment of over $10 million into Gulf Wind Technologies. So those innovations in the wind sector being supported by our traditional energy folks. We see Valero, for example, in Chalmette, their refining capability down there, enhancing and expanding into biodiesel and some biofuels. It's a wide spectrum of energy opportunities, but when we look at what's been announced and we look at our pipeline and what's forthcoming, it is wild to see where Louisiana is positioned and how we're attracting and really leveraging our longstanding energy reputation and assets to bring on more investment into our state.
Okay, lots to follow up on there.
Dive on in.
Let's do it. I want to talk about money, but the first thing I want to ask about is, you're mentioning an all of the above approach, right? Yay, option D, all of the above. But what are we best at? What is Louisiana most uniquely positioned to be best at?
I'm a little biased because in my economic development background, more specifically, is workforce, and I'm a Louisiana native, multi-generational product of this state and of the people of this state. So when I look at Louisiana and our landscape, I am blown away by our workforce. We have an incredibly skilled, incredibly talented workforce. We have folks who have been working in the oil and gas sector for generations, who are now directly translating that expertise into wind, into solar. As Camille mentioned, when we look at the future energy landscape and we look at the jobs that are going to be required, about 80% are what we've always needed in the energy sector. And we have the quality of instruction at many of our 2-year community colleges, at our 4-year schools like LSU, Southeastern, Nichols, who are able to really leverage that strong background in those pipelines of education to continue building on that workforce. Our struggle right now, quite frankly, in the workforce space, I know we're talking about opportunities, but please. I'm in strengths, but I'll talk about the challenges too. Our struggle in the workforce space, to me, what keeps me up at night is the quantity of folks that are going to and through those educational programs. And not just the raw numbers, but also the diversity of folks going to and through those educational programs. When we look across the highest paid jobs, the highest demand jobs in the energy sector in South Louisiana, over 80% are occupied by white men. And I have nothing against white men, but we need more people who are female. We need more people who are BIPOC represented in that workforce if we're going to have a truly equitable opportunity in the energy space moving forward. And that's an area where we need to move the needle dramatically and aggressively. So while I feel our greatest strength in Louisiana is our people, we need to make sure that all of those people are being brought to bear in this energy transition and in this opportunity. I think the second thing, and to me it gets me a little less excited because I'm not an engineer, but the infrastructure that we have in Louisiana. It is just absolutely outstanding. Both our pipeline network, our rail network, the water access that we have, the Mississippi River, the Gulf of Mexico. We're an incredibly rich state when it comes to our infrastructure assets, and then our natural geologies as well. So we have a lot to leverage and a lot to bank on in those respects.
People, how do we bring them along?
So I think this is the tough question. I think this is the, if I'm looking at our pipeline and our announced projects, I think this is the $50 billion question. How do we make sure our communities are actually benefiting from these announcements in a real, meaningful way? How are we having the dialogue, the discussion that matters such that we can get the workforce we need into these opportunities and have our communities truly benefit from the investments that are being made? I don't know if I have all the answers to this question. I think that there's some immediate things that we are doing in my work every day and that we're doing with many of our partners in the room, such as building out tighter community connections between some of our colleges and our universities and some of our nonprofit partners. I'm fortunate in my position at GNO Inc. We received, as some of you know, a $75 million grant from the Economic Development Administration, matched with another 25, it was $50 million from EDA, matched with another 25 from Louisiana Economic Development in 2022. And that's to underwrite a project called H to the Future. This is a large-scale grant that allows GNO Inc. to work with about 25 project partners across South Louisiana. Of those 25 project partners, we have a number of community colleges. We have a number of HBCUs. We have a number of four-year schools. We have a number of nonprofit partners, small business accelerators, et cetera, economic development partners that are all under this large umbrella so that we can work collectively and cohesively together to start to break down some of these intrinsic barriers. I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing with our HBCUs, for example. Each of the 4 HBCUs that are involved in this particular grant have $1 million to build out curriculum that is specific for their students to position them for careers in clean energy. We've been working with them for the last year to stand up some of those programs, and while that's really exciting, when I step back and look at the curriculum they're putting in place, and I meet with these students, I've met with quite a few at Southern who are absolutely fantastic. They're so enthusiastic. They're amazing. I shouldn't say kids, that's patronizing. They're amazing young people, just fantastic folks. But to get them really into careers in clean energy, they need work-based learning opportunities. They need internships at our local energy players with our local energy companies. So we're facilitating that through GNO Inc. to add that last mile connection to make sure it isn't just curriculum, it isn't just book learning, but it's actually getting into these opportunities with our large industry partners, some of our smaller utility providers as well, to see what goes on behind the scenes. Make the appropriate career decisions for them so that we can start moving the needle in these areas and, again, create stronger connections back to our communities. I feel like that example isn't necessarily at scale, and it's not yet. I'll own that. But we got to start somewhere, and we have to figure out the models and the systems that are going to start making change and making that impact, and then scale them from there. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of partnerships that need to be brokered, but we're starting that. And I think we're moving forward in really positive directions with the right players.
So you're talking about some of the investment. I think you said 50 billion. Yeah, you gotta. They're labeled.
Yes, I know that's helpful.
We try to. I know it's
that's
nice.
Right? I mean, I don't mind drinking after Brad and Camille, but. Yeah.
So you mentioned the $50 billion. We're talking about lots of investment here. Are we talking like economic development wise? Are we talking new logos coming into Louisiana? Are we talking? Yeah. I mean, obviously Shell, right? We've got these guys here. Who else are we talking about?
So it's a super interesting mix of both the established, long-standing energy partners that have been in the state, again, for generations in some cases, 50 plus years, and then we have new folks coming in. Sometimes in this sort of entrepreneurial way. We are very excited about the accelerator that we brought in through our H to the Future initiative, which is OHUB. They're the largest Black-owned accelerator program in the country. They were based out of Atlanta. They're still based out of Atlanta, but now they have a full suite of Louisiana operations, which is fantastic. fantastic. So they're attracting entrepreneurs into Louisiana, working with existing startups to build a new base of new logos in the startup space. In addition, when we look at our project pipeline, we're seeing really interesting folks who have maybe been in the startup scene in other parts of the country, who've generated a lot of capital investment and are now bringing their innovation to Louisiana. I think the direct air capture hub in Lake Charles is one of the best examples of this. You have projects like Heirloom, or partners like Heirloom and Climeworks and Battelle as part of that DAC hub, which has a $600 million investment from DOE. Both Heirloom and Climeworks are large-scale, high-capacity startups from other parts of the country that are now coming into Louisiana to bring their innovations to ground here and bring jobs online to Louisiana. So it's not just new logos in terms of, oh, we've always had operations in New Jersey and now we're coming to Louisiana. There's some of those, and that's interesting, but there's really high-growth, high-capacity startups that are moving into our landscape because they see what's going on here. They see the momentum, they see the energy, pun intended. They're excited to be a part of what we have going on, and in many instances in partnership with some of our legacy energy partners as well.
How much are incentives a piece of that conversation?
You know, it's interesting. There's incentives on the state level, which certainly many industrial partners do take advantage of. But what we've really seen from the incentive standpoint that has jump-started so much of this activity is the incentives from the IRA, so the Inflation Reduction Act, and those incentives that are coming down from the federal level. The 45Q tax credit, for example, that's really underpinning so much of the carbon capture work that we're seeing across the state. The 45Q tax credit is making that bankable in terms of a balance sheet perspective, but then Louisiana's unique geology, the industrial folks and customers that we have in Louisiana already, that's really underwriting so much of that blue hydrogen, blue ammonia, those announcements that we're seeing in our pipeline because of those CCS opportunities and 45Q. It's interesting when you look away from the blue hydrogen space into the green hydrogen space. The tax credit that was really intended to underpin much of the clean hydrogen production that would be green hydrogen would be included within. That tax credit's being kind of called into question right now. Some of the rules that have come down from Treasury are really tight and really difficult for industry to apply and work with and work around within their existing projects or their proposed green hydrogen projects. And that's disconcerting. That's concerning for us when we see an incentive that is intended to shift a market that likely won't be workable if it stands as is. That's a piece that we've taken a lot of advocacy initiatives and efforts around in partnership with many folks in the room. We need to make sure that tax credit's workable, not just on the books.
Yeah. One of the recent reports that came out from Pew, actually, I believe you guys and CPEX worked with Pew to put that report together, gave 5 recommendations for Louisiana's offshore wind potential in particular. So of those 5 recommendations, I made them very short, so bear with me. Get Louisiana positioned for bigger export contracts, invest in the workforce, upgrade ports, create a state agency with some official goals, and then get buy-in from state leaders. What's the easiest one? What's the hardest one?
Ooh, so since we chatted last week, I've been thinking through easiest and hardest, and I feel like those might be the wrong metrics to use around all 5 of those goals. Because what I love about the Pew report, and massive credit to Camille, my colleague Cam Poole, who were really head first in all of that report's creation. I think everything that's listed is so doable and so achievable. And we are working aggressively, I think, on all 5 of those recommendations already. So much of what's being recommended is already underway. I think if any were particularly easy, then we would have already done it. We wouldn't be doing it. We wouldn't be in process. But I do think they're all achievable. I think, when we look to the Louisiana export opportunity, we know from Oceanic, which is the nation's largest wind trade association, that Louisiana firms and Gulf Coast firms are receiving about 20% of the wind contracts nationally already. So that expertise that we've built over generations servicing offshore energy assets in the Gulf of Mexico, that's already being exported to New England. And frankly, from that perspective, while I would love to grow that piece of the pie, and I think there's opportunity as more of those New England projects come online, as more of the West Coast projects open up, there's very strict and stringent local hiring regulations in some of those markets. So while I think we can definitely grow the opportunity as those wind projects grow, I'm not sure if percentage-wise if we've already hit the cap or if we're going to be able to push against it. But I'm 100% confident in the ability and capability of our local firms to export everything they have to those national markets. Huge opportunity there. Certainly the wind supplier database that we've put together to help some of our smaller contractors and servicing firms who either are working in wind or have capacity to work in wind, to connect with some of those larger, what we would call the tier one wind providers, and start making those direct business development relationships, start getting in on some of those contracts. That's incredibly exciting. We've started that work, had some good successes so far, but there's a lot still to be done in that landscape. The workforce piece, we keep mentioning this transferability of skills between oil and gas and wind. And while that's incredibly exciting, again, I think the big challenge there is making sure that our young people, starting in middle school, understand that there's an opportunity for them to work in the wind sector, regardless of whether or not they know anyone who's ever done it, which most of our young people probably won't, regardless if they're a female, regardless if English is their second language, regardless of where they're coming from, there's an opportunity in the wind space for them. We have to start getting that message out now, and that's a big lift. It seems like low-hanging fruit, but it's actually a big lift when we're striving to do that. And then I think really on the state side, making sure that all of our elected officials and appointed officials understand the additionality of wind, understand that this isn't undercutting our traditional energy sector, that this isn't, as we like to say, an either or, this is a both and opportunity, and that we keep that messaging tight, we stay aligned on that opportunity. That's really critical when we talk about building out some of the pieces at the state level, like a state office, for example. So all of that, I wouldn't say any of it's easy. I think it's different degrees of hard, if that makes sense, right? But what I do know is all of those aspects, no one entity, no one nonprofit or individual is going to be able to move all of that on their own. It's going to take a collective, concerted effort of a number of wide-ranging partners from different areas, different aspects, industry, nonprofit, community, all working collectively if we're going to be able to get this done quickly and efficiently.
Speaking of quick and efficient, that's all we have time for.
Boom.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And everyone stick around for one more guest.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.